Transformative Power of Local Governance as a part of the Perspective Seminar. The endeavor aims to inspire young public policy enthusiasts with critical perspectives needed to build an equitable and prosperous future for the nation, particularly the most marginalized communities in rural India. Friends, I would also like to bring to your attention that this is the first time we are broadcasting this seminar to ensure that the spirit and substance of a Praxis Classroom reaches a wider audience. A Praxis Classroom, as some of you would already know, by being part of such a classroom, is essentially a site of synthesis of public policy practice and academic rigor. It is at this classroom where our learners who are posted in the resource-starved districts of UP, Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Bodoland, Maharashtra get informed with academic concepts and frameworks that equip them with the knowledge and perspectives needed for an empirical and community-centric public policy practice at the administration. Before I hand it over to Sir, I will briefly contextualize today's seminar a little bit. India has been undergoing a rapid urbanization that happens to be significantly unplanned. What that means is that there is an ever-growing presence of unplanned structure, that is, structures that arise without legal approval. Considered illegal, these structures are denied formal services of water supply and sanitation. The settlements are often inflicted with outbreaks of diseases thus. Studies on India's waterborne diseases show that between 4 lakh and 5 lakh children aged under 5 years die each year from diarrhea. The report said, citing a failure to improve personal home hygiene as a factor. Given this rapid trend of urbanization, can rural and urban be neatly separated when peri-urban areas are rapidly growing? What are the possibilities of ensuring basic services like health and hygiene reach the last mile when unplanned growth is as below? What should be the local government's role in all this? If it is local government that ensures basic services trickle down, can they be reduced to the third tier of government? To help us think through these questions and possibly even find answers, we have with us Shri Sunil Kumar, former Secretary of the Ministry of Panchayati Raj. Welcome, sir. Sir has been instrumental in strengthening the democratic governance processes, empowering PRIs, and bringing participation, transparency, and accountability to the PRI system. He has contributed in the localization of SDGs in India, strengthening institutional framework and mechanism for integrated convergent planning and aligning it to LSDGs to the IT governance aspects in improved planning, Gram Panchayat development planning, digitalization of processes, and integration of public finance management system across Panchayat. Welcome to the seminar, sir, again. I would like to hand it over to you right now.
First of all, good afternoon to all participants. It is indeed a pleasure to speak on this subject, which I think is quite broad in its scope, but it is something on which we need to focus, discuss, and think more about this. Unfortunately, local government has not received the type of attention that it ought to have received in independent India. All of you would be aware that the seeds of local government, as we understand it today, were sown by Lord Ripon in the late 19th century. While India has had a tradition of local government, but it was more to do with sort of acting like a Nyay Panchayat, that is, sorting out disputes which arose in the community, rather than sort of performing agency functions as such. It was only in the late 19th century that the seeds of local self-government were sown. And after independence, when the constitution was in the making, there was considerable debate and discussion around this subject. There was one stream of thought led by Mahatma Gandhi, which felt that strong panchayats, and we must remember that at that point of time, India was largely rural. Most of the population lived in rural areas, and urbanization was restricted to a few big towns such as Bombay, Calcutta, Madras. And it was in that context that Gandhi and his followers, the Gandhian leaders, they felt that panchayats ought to form the basis for governance in independent India. However, in the Constituent Assembly, there was considerable debate around it, and people felt that given the circumstances in which India had gained independence, when it was paramount to maintain the unity and integrity of the country and sort out the issues that had arisen due to partition, people felt that at this point of time, tinkering with the administration, the bureaucracy, may or may not be exactly suitable. So at that point of time, it was agreed that local self-government could be taken up in due course. And in the Indian Constitution, it formed, or local self-government found mention only in Article 40. That was included in the directive principles of state policy. Otherwise, if you look at Indian Constitution, it explained or laid out in considerable detail the way Government of India would function, the way it would be organized, how the legislature, the executive, the judiciary would be working. So both at the central level as well as at the state level. But it was virtually, except for that brief mention in Article 40, local government did not find a mention in the Indian Constitution, which was adopted in the Constituent Assembly on 26 November 1949. But at the same time, because of Gandhi's and the Gandhian leaders' strong views on Panchayati Raj, the community development program that was introduced in 1952, and ultimately the setting up of Balwant Rai Mehta Committee report and various other reports, Ashok Mehta Committee report in 1978. It was finally in 1993 that the local self-governments became a part of the Indian Constitution, following the passage of 73rd and 74th Constitution Amendment Act. Now, it is important that if you look at other developed countries, you'll find each one of them has a very strong local government. In fact, in 1835, the French philosopher de Tocqueville, he had visited US and he had remarked as to how the local governments in small settlements in United States were functioning and formed the core of democracy in that country. And even today, if you look at it, all developed countries, which is primarily the Western countries, they have very strong local governments in place. Whether it is US, whether it is in Europe, they find pride of place in the structure along with federal government, along with state government, and then you have the local governments. But in India, as I mentioned, initially it was not there. It formed a part of the Indian Constitution only in 1993. Here we would do well to remember what Rajiv Gandhi had to say when he introduced the bill in 1989 in Parliament. He had mentioned that a wide chasm separated the largest body of the electorate from a small number of its elected representatives. This gap has been occupied by the power brokers, the middlemen, and vested interests. With the passage of this bill, the panchayats would emerge as a firm building block of administration and development as an instrument in the consolidation of democracy at the grassroots. So this was the belief, and this, after the passing away of Rajiv Gandhi, the 73rd and 74th Constitution Amendment Acts, which were passed by the Parliament and approved by a majority of the state assemblies, it was in a way a tribute to late Rajiv Gandhi. And after that, we see that over 30 years have passed since the coming into force of 73rd and 74th Constitution Amendment Act. Now, before we go into examining the 73rd and 74th Constitution Amendment Act, the local government, the structure of local government in rural and urban areas that were put in place, it would be good to bear in mind that it is democracy and federalism which form the core of Indian Constitution. And in fact, if we look at the Supreme Court judgment in Keshwanand Bharti case, which was delivered on 24th April 1973, in the basic structure of the Constitution, the Supreme Court held that both democracy and federalism would constitute the core of basic structure of the Constitution. It is my view that because of this emphasis on democracy and federalism, the local government, which have now been included as a part of the Indian Constitution, following the introduction of Part 9 and Part 9A of the Indian Constitution. Today, if the Supreme Court were to revisit this issue, perhaps it would say that local governments also constitute the basic structure of the Indian Constitution. So in that sense, this passage of 73rd and 74th Constitution Amendment Acts were extremely important, as it provided that constitutional status to local government, which earlier was not there. Why it is important is that if we have to look at this institution just in terms of sheer size of elected representatives, then in a country of 140 crores, the number of members of parliament and MLAs would not even be 5,000, just near about 5,000. At the moment, it would be 750 odd number of MPs and about 4,300 would be the total number of MLAs of all the states put together. And then you have the Panchayati Raj institution elected representatives with over 2.5 lakh panchayats. The number is nearing 32 lakhs, 31.88 lakh, of which about 14.5 lakh are women representatives. That is roughly about 46%. And if you look at the urban local governments, then the number of elected representatives there would be about a lakh, and the number of women elected representatives would be around 37,000, as has been reported in the, or which is there in the public domain. So with this 33 lakh elected representatives compared to 5,000, now if Gandhi were to say that he does not feel that 20 odd people representing the people in a legislature constitutes democracy, and in fact he was so critical of Western democracy that he even went to the extent of saying that my notion of democracy is that under it, the weakest shall have the same opportunities as the strongest. No country in the world today shows any but patronizing regard for the weak. Western democracy, as it functions today, is diluted fascism. True democracy cannot be worked by 20 men sitting at the center. It has to be worked from below by the people of every village. So if you look at this and put it in context, 5,000 MPs and MLAs who are elected by the people in an election held every 5 years, and they would be ruling over the entire 140 crore, can at best be called representative democracy, where people, through these representatives, in an ideal situation, their views ought to be represented. But in practice, we find that once the voter has exercised his right on the day of election, he has to patiently wait for his turn after another 5 years. Even meeting the elected representatives becomes an issue. And more often than not, we in the bureaucracy, we have seen that all these MPs and MLAs, they constitute or they nominate representatives, their representatives. So one who is the representative of the people, he in turn nominates another set of people as his representatives who are supposed to interact with the people. And whatever the people have to say on any subject, that should be communicated to the elected representative, the MP or the MLA, through their nominated representatives in the constituency. And it is these nominated representatives who interact or liaison with the local administration, the bureaucracy, at the district or block level. So this is a far cry from democracy or the ideal of democracy. So in that sense, having more than 33 lakh elected representatives is certainly a huge improvement over those 5,000 MPs and MLAs that we had prior to 93. And we have seen that it is the representatives, these elected representatives of local bodies, who are present 24/7 in the villages, in the urban areas, town areas, or municipalities, 24/7 throughout the year. And during the period of COVID lockdown, we have seen that it was these elected representatives, local body elected representatives, were the one who were the face of government before the people. It was not the bureaucracy. It was not the MLAs and MPs. They were situated far away. So in that sense, if you look at it, yes, the local government, even if you look at it purely in terms of numbers of elected representatives, they are a far more democratic structure than the legislative assembly or the parliament as it is today, if you look at it from the citizens' point of view. And if you look at certain institutions, like Gram Sabha, then you find that it contains the seeds of direct democracy. And that I'll explain in due course. Now here, one point which I would like to clarify is that 73rd Constitution Amendment Act, it dealt with Panchayati Raj. And these were in the rural areas. Whereas in the urban areas, the town areas, municipality and corporations, they came into force via the 74th Constitution Amendment Act. And what we hear and what people say is that 74th Constitution Amendment Act was in effect an afterthought. When people felt that you are bringing in a constitution amendment to set up Panchayati Raj system in the rural areas, what about the urban areas? Should we not have something for them too? And then if you look at 74th Constitution Amendment Act, it seems as if the institutions or something which was designed for the rural areas has been put in place in the 74th CA, Constitution Amendment Act. Why I am pointing this out? Because later on I'll explain how there are serious design flaws, especially in 74th Constitution Amendment Act, and to an extent in 73rd Constitution Amendment Act too. But I'll deal with that later. And why it becomes important is that, as was being mentioned by Shruti earlier in her introductory remarks, that this rural-urban classification is more administrative rather than anything substantive on the ground, if you look at it from the citizen's point of view. In the Indian context, there is mention of definition of urban areas in the census, and it says that there should be a population density of 400 plus, more than the minimum population of the habitation should be 5,000 plus, and then at least 75% of the people should be involved or engaged in non-agricultural works. These are the three major sort of classifications which are used by the census to determine what is rural and what is urban. And if you look at it, and that's why when they say these are urban, they have come up with a classification of census towns, which remain Gram Panchayats, but show all the features which would make them urban as per the classification adopted by the Indian census. And This rural and urban syndrome, as I would say, is more in the mind. It's more an administrative bifurcation rather than a real bifurcation. And that's why we see that according to Indian census, it's only 32% of the population which is urban. And here too, studies show when you look at the nighttime luminosity studies, the satellite pictures, the reports of World Banks and other organizations, then they are showing that India is urbanizing at a much faster pace than what official records show. And different studies indicate that India today is more urban than rural. In certain states like Tamil Nadu and Kerala, already urban population is more than 50%. And if we take into account the night luminosity studies, then in states like Kerala, the urban population would be nearly 80%. But still, officially, it is roughly around 52% or so. 48% remains rural, and they are governed as panchayats, not as urban local bodies. And as I was saying, the estimates show that in states like Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala, urbanization is happening at a very fast pace. And one would not be surprised that even in the next census, numbers in these states would go far ahead of what is believed to be or what is estimated. And similarly, there are pockets in other parts of the country where urbanization is happening at a very rapid pace. And unplanned growth is happening there. But they are governed by Gram Panchayats. And there are certain features of this local government system which is in place in rural areas and urban areas, which makes them unfit. I'm using a very strong word, unfit, to address these issues. And these refer to the design flaws which are there in both the rural and urban local governments system which has been put in place. Why this is important is because all studies show that definitely by 2047, more than 50% of India's population would be staying in urban areas. By any account, even if we stick to the very sort of rigid definition which has been adopted by the census authorities. There are other studies which show that this could happen as early as 2030. Now, if 50% of the population are going to stay in urban areas, that is roughly about 70-75 crores by 2030, then that's a very huge number. And we will need to address them. So when we are going to examine this transformative power of local governance, we must remember that one, all developed countries have very strong local government setups. it is very difficult to govern any country effectively by centralizing power. There has to be decentralization of powers. And for that, you need to have very strong local government. So one conceptually, at the level of principles, local government is the institution where direct democracy to the maximum extent can become possible, even theoretically. It is certainly not possible at the state level or Government of India level. The state legislatures and the parliament in no way can they become a forum for direct democracy. But Gram Sabha, which has been specifically mentioned in the Indian Constitution, is one institution where all members, all voters of the Panchayat are members of the Gram Sabha. So theoretically, Gram Sabha is the institution which comes closest to offering even a glimpse of direct democracy to citizens in rural areas. In the urban areas, whether it is town area or municipality or the corporation, there is no such institution. In 2005-2006, a model municipal law was circulated, which brought in the concept of Mohalla Sabha or Area Sabha. But these remain on paper till date. So what we will need to do is that this is something which we will need to focus on. We look at local governments. If it has to be transformative in its impact, then from the citizens' point of view, citizens must have a role in the functioning of local government. And that can be made possible through the Gram Sabha in Panchayati Raj institutions. The Area Sabha, which has or which figures in the municipal acts of several states, but they remain on paper because the state governments made those amendments with a view to report to Ministry of Urban Development, Government of India, that they have carried out the sort of amendments so that they could access the funds being made available under JNURM, the huge funds which government was dispensing with under these centrally sponsored scheme. But they had no real intention of sort of actually putting those into effect. So if we look at it from the citizens' point of view, institutions like Gram Sabha, they need to be made more real than they are. Even in rural areas, they are not functioning in the manner they ought to have functioned. So there is a huge area or work to be done, even in the way of making Gram Sabhas realize the ideals which had been sort of perpetuated or thought of by Mahatma Gandhi or later even Jayaprakash Narayan, and which in a way, by having a specific mention in the 73rd Amendment Act, I suppose even the Parliament or Government of India will that yes, Gram Sabha is an institution which is of critical importance. Now, so Gram Sabha, Area Sabha or Mohalla Sabha in urban bodies, these will need to be made really strong and effective if citizens are to have a greater say in the working of the local governments. Now here, before we look into local government as the institution or an agency which delivers impact at the last mile, it is important that we also take into account what we have achieved in the last 75 years. And today, various authors, they have come to the conclusion that the present structure of central and state government and very weak local government, it has failed to deliver or empower the citizens. And whether it is Raghuram Rajan in his latest book, Breaking the Mold, or Ashoka Modi in his book, India is Broken, they have very clearly laid down that there is no way in which we can even hope to become a developed country or break free from the morass that we find ourselves in today if we do not strengthen the local governments. If there is not greater decentralization of power, funds, functions, and functionaries, these need to be decentralized. And that has to happen to a far greater extent than we have seen in the last 3 decades. In fact, the trend in the last few years is towards centralization. And technology here, especially information technology, has become a tool by which policymakers believe that they can address issues of reaching the last person. They can address issues like corruption. They can address various other systemic issues which hitherto remained unresolved. But the evidence shows that unfortunately these remain, or this faith in technology, or that information technology holds the key for all the issues that we face today, appears to be misplaced. And these people have sort of mentioned that without governance reforms, including strengthening democratic institutions and greater decentralization, which only will make the government more responsive to the bottom-up demand of our people for better public services, other reforms will have little effect. So this appears to be the most plausible way of promoting vibrant civic regions, where despite its challenges, local self-government is the most promising way to establish social norms that induce cooperative behavior and political accountability. So if you look at it, what are the pillars of good governance? Good governance demands respect for human rights, rule of law, strengthening of democracy, promoting transparency, and capacity in public administration. The responsiveness of the state and its institutions to the needs and aspirations of the people and inclusive citizenship are imperative to good governance. Democracy depends upon the equality of all human beings, their right to participate in social and political transformation, and the right to development to live in dignity. So if these are the principles or the basic foundations of public policy, democracy, federalism, accountability, responsiveness, transparency, then we will need to see why it is so. And if we look at it, various economists say that based on the subsidiarity principle, a work should be done at the level which is closest to the people. And by that yardstick, local government, whether rural or urban, they are the closest to the people. And this we have seen in the times of COVID, how effectively the local government and especially the elected representatives intervened and ensured that the COVID vaccination problems, issues were taken care of. The migrants who returned from the urban areas to rural areas in droves, in millions, how they were looked after in the villages. All these things we have seen at the time of COVID, and it is only thereafter that we find that the view of some people towards local government changed to an extent. We found then that government of Odisha even gave magisterial powers to the sarpanches. And these were duly notified. Further, if you look at it, it's only at the local government or in local government that it is very clear to citizens whether or not the local government is delivering. Either the pothole gets filled in or it doesn't. In fact, we have heard it so many times. In Uttar Pradesh, our former Chief Minister, Mr. Kalyan Singh, when he came to power in 1998, his first priority was Gaddha Mukt Sadak. And we found that money was released. PWD, which was the implementing agency, they reported on paper that all potholes have been filled, but actually in reality it was not so. Forget Uttar Pradesh, even in Delhi, the streets are potholed. And now we have the Chief Minister saying that within the month of October, all potholes will be filled up. And it would be done by the Public Works Department. The MCD would not be involved. And how effective it would be even in a small state like Delhi, remains to be seen. So if you look at all these things, or in this background, it becomes extremely clear that there is no substitute for local government. Now, whether it can be transformative, yes, it can be transformative if we address those design flaws. And what are these design flaws? First, the say of citizens in the affairs of local government. As I said earlier, Gram Sabha is one critical institution. But still, the way Gram Sabha has been functioning, we have seen it function in the last 30 years. Even in the best of states, it leaves a lot to be desired. And we'll have a separate sort of session on that as to how Gram Sabha can be sort of strengthened. But if you look at it, if we begin to look at Gram Sabha and say that Gram Sabha is to the local people, same as Vidhan Sabha is at the state level and Lok Sabha is at the central level. Or if we say the tagline, Gram Sabha se Lok Sabha tak, if we begin to look at Gram Sabha in the same vein, then a lot of these design defects will become evident, and then we would be in a position to address them. In the urban bodies, the general assemblies, whether in municipalities or corporations, the way they function leaves a lot to be desired. And the say of citizens, also because these urban bodies are bigger bodies, that is at a considerable disadvantage or inferior position compared to what it is in the rural areas or in the Gram Sabha. So there is no getting away from having these area sabhas or mohalla sabhas functional in a very effective manner. Similarly, in the rural areas, apart from Gram Sabha, we'll need to go at a still lower level, at the level of wards, and say that Ward Sabha also needs to be strengthened and it needs to be recognized. Ward Sabha is recognized in the state Panchayati Raj acts of several states, but there's a lot that needs to be sort of done in that regard. So that we will address at a later stage. Here, this is one design flaw which gives citizens greater say in the functioning of local government, which I am referring to or alluding to. The next is, what would be the relationship between the Gram Panchayat, which ostensibly should be the executive of at the Panchayat level, and the Gram Sabha, if it were to be the legislative body or something akin to Vidhan Sabha, and the Panchayat, the executive, were to be accountable to it. If we begin to look at that, then the way our Gram Panchayat functions, where powers and functions have been sort of concentrated in the hands of the Sarpanch and the Panchayat Secretary, this trend is not as per the best democratic traditions. And this concentration of power, in a way, defeats the various accountability and other mechanisms which were to be in place. So Gram Sabha as an institution of social audit, it remains on paper. Gram Sabha as the body to whom the sarpanch and the ward members, the chairmen of various standing committees would be answerable to. That remains on paper. The local bureaucracy and their accountability to the panchayat and through the panchayat to the Gram Sabha has not been factored in at all. So all these design flaws need to be sort of factored in, need to be addressed going forward. And in this regard, I would also refer to not only the sort of seminal essay written by Shri Jayaprakash Narayan way back in 1959, when he had captioned his essay as a plea for the reconstruction of Indian polity. We may or may not fully agree with him. But the bottom line is that his advocacy for strong local government institutions at the panchayat level, of treating Gram Sabha as the legislature and treating the panchayat, that is the sarpanch and the elected ward members, as the executive, is something that we need to act upon. And this is also something which in 1999, the then Minister of State, Independent Charge in Government of India, Babu Gowda Patil, he had written a letter to all CMs, Chief Ministers of State, where he had said that Gram Sabha should be seen as something akin to the legislature and the panchayat as something akin to the executive. And after that, various efforts were made. In fact, in 2004, there was a Kolkata declaration where all state representatives, they agreed to take steps to strengthen the Gram Sabha, but that has not happened. In 110 districts which come under PESA, there too, the Gram Sabha, by and large, remains a very weak institution. There has been, compared to other 9 states, situation is relatively better in Maharashtra, but there is huge scope for improvement in Maharashtra too. So therefore, there is urgent need to address these governance issues in both urban and local government level. And for that, we need to think as to how do we empower the citizens, how do we give them a greater voice and control over the bureaucracy, over the executive. Now, if you look at the delivery of services, the agency functions, then today we find that the way local government is treated as if it is a subordinate of the state government or of the various line departments and their functionaries who are working in this, in the state. And when you treat them as implementing agencies who just have to follow the orders and not take a call as to how best the goals can be realized in their panchayats, we find that at the end of the day, funds have been spent on paper at best one time. Certain goal has been achieved, but then that has not been maintained. And here I am referring to the Swachh Bharat Mission goals. On October 2, 2019, India was declared open defecation free. And even today, various surveys, whether it is NFHS or other reports, they show that at best, the coverage is way below 100%. At best, it would be in the region of 75 to 80%. So what this shows is that unless and until citizens own that up, the implementation of these schemes will also have limited impact. I'm not saying it will have no impact, but it will have only limited impact. It's only when the citizens acting through their local governments own these programs up, own these targets up, that they would find ways and means to maintain the structures, the assets that have come in place, and also bring about those behavioral changes, which is essential for attaining these goals relating to water and sanitation. And just the other day on 2nd October, you had Naina Lal Kidwai, who is head of the India Sanitation Foundation, writing in a public, in the Indian Express, that only if the citizens own it up will the gains of Swachh Bharat mission be permanent. Otherwise, it will just fade away. Even in Jal Jeevan Mission, we find that in several places, it is being executed by the departments and being transferred or forcibly transferred over. Their O&M is being forcibly transferred over to the local governments. And there are deep issues involved there. If the quality of the asset is not up to the mark, then how would the local government maintain it? And you look at an example from the urban areas. Indirapuram locality in Ghaziabad is being handed over to the Ghaziabad Municipal Corporation. And the Awas Vikas Vibhag, which sort of created that whole township, now it is paying money to the Nagarpalika or to the corporation to ensure that the drains which were constructed, they are repaired. The various physical assets are public amenities which were provided by Awas Vikas Parishad, they are repaired. So the design flaw is that these multiplicity of parastatal agencies which are there, they create more problems than they solve. And by neglecting the local governments, whether urban or rural, we are not really addressing these issues. And consequently, we find that even the delivery of services which are assigned to local governments, because there has not been commensurate devolution of funds, functions, and functionaries, we find that these urban bodies or rural bodies are not capable of providing those services to the people at the expected level. And here one comes to the other target, that is the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, if you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, those 17 Sustainable Development Goals, you find that at least 11 of those can only be executed and implemented properly by the local governments. And in India, we find that the entire sort of onus of realizing those sustainable development goals has been put on the parastatal bodies. not on the local government. In rural areas, an attempt has been made to put those 17 sustainable development goals, present it to the local population, the Gram Sabhas, by merging them into 9 themes, which people can easily accept and understand. These goals have to be put across to the people in a manner which they can understand and appreciate. And then they can think of ways and means of how to solve those issues, solve those problems, or attain those goals. If one were to just take the issue of poverty reduction, ultimately the role of local government or the panchayat should not be only of selection of beneficiaries. They should also be entrusted or given the powers to find the ways in which poverty can be reduced. If employment has to be provided for 100 days, why should not that be the responsibility of the panchayat rather than of state government and central government? If you look at Manrega, the way that act has been devised, there is no way in which a person who is denied his right of 100 days wage employment can ever sort of contest and succeed against the mighty state, whether at the state level or at Government of India level. And if you look at the act, there are sufficient loopholes left there which protect the bureaucrats in the event of any failure. So the bureaucrats are fully protected, but not so the citizens. So what has been guaranteed by the act, in effect, remains on paper. So the point which I am making here is that even if these sustainable development goals are to be realized, we have seen that in 2015, it was accepted by all the states, all the countries in the world. It was only in 2020 that their task force came up with the concept that it needs to be localized. And here too, if you look at country experience in different regions of the world, we find that there are variations. And now we are in 2024, almost nearing its end, with just 6 years remaining. It appears that there is no way in which these goals can be realized. And with the specter of war looming, with basic amenities not being destroyed in the war and strife in different parts of the world, there is no way in which these goals can be achieved. But if we just dwell in the Indian context, much more needs to be done. It needs to be looked at in a totally different way, because there is no way in which we can achieve these goals by working through departments in the center and the states. It must be owned up by the people, and the only way in which it can happen is when we operate or take the local self-governments into confidence and trust them, empower them. Similarly, on issues relating to climate change, the role of local government is going to be extremely important. But here again, we see that the focus is on sort of strengthening certain departments, providing them with more capital assets, and having a belief that through technology, all these issues can be sort of sorted out. But we'll see that has not happened. It's not happening. Even Europe and US, when they are faced with the fury of nature, they find that their systems, their technology and everything, it falls short. So there is no getting away from sort of sorting out these governance issues. So in my view, the potential or the transformative power of local governance is the maximum, whether conceptually or even in practice, or even if we look at precedents. It is the local government which has the power to transform. The district administration, on which we seem to lay great store by, it is not designed to bring about these transformative changes. And in my view, there is no way in which the collector and working through the departments at the district level, the way in which it is organized today, can ever effectively deliver any service to citizens. But we find that the belief in the collector, in the bureaucrat, to deliver all these is so huge that even today we see that in Assam, now they are creating a co-district, something like co-district, a unit below the collector, headed by IAS or senior PCS officers, and then trying to achieve those goals through the bureaucracy, through the line departments. In my view, it is bound to fail. So in the end, I would conclude, I would take up more questions and give more sort of detailed replies to the questions if they are asked. I would conclude by saying that what is required is that all of us need to collectively begin to think on these issues. More often than not, we take certain things as given, and then we build that limitation around us that we have to operate within this framework. Here, time has come where that framework needs to be taken or needs to be critically analyzed. And if there are deficiencies, then it needs to be redesigned. And that can be done only by us, by no one else. And this important work should not be left to a handful of people at the state or government of India level to find all solutions to all the problems that people face. It is time where people in government, outside government, practitioners, academics, everyone needs to come together. And I would believe and that our role in this becomes extremely critical, because we just can't hold a referendum without explaining to the people as to what exactly they are getting into. On all these complex issues, we need to take people into confidence. But for that, we will need to communicate to them the various options, the various intricacies of the problem in a manner which they can understand. And then their views or their opinions will become extremely sort of critical. An example in this is that what referendums can do even in a developed country like Britain is the referendum that they did on Brexit. And today, a lot of people feel that it has created more problems than it has solved. So sometimes the numbers alone do not help, but at the same time, it is extremely important that we don't treat citizens as dumb individuals who cannot think on their own, who have no thinking power. They do and they can, and that ability they have. So what I would urge you is that if we have to look at this whole issue, first of all, our commitment to local government has to be absolutely unwavering. We must begin to believe that, yes, it is local government that holds the key, nothing else. Our working with district administration or the collector is not really going to help. But if we begin to work with the sarpanches, with the panchayats, with the gram sabhas, then perhaps there is some hope that we can sort of find answers which are sustainable, which are acceptable, and where chances of success will be much more than what it is today. So we need to believe in what we are doing. And as Calvin Coolidge had said, in life, there is nothing more common than talent and intelligence. What is missing is passion, persistence, commitment, and dedication. And this is something that we believe that it is our duty to bring these sort of qualities into effect, into play, and help citizens collectively find solutions. And there we can play a very important role. So with this, I'll conclude my talk here, and I'm open to hear or take questions from you and try and answer them to the best of my ability. Thank you.
Thank you. You can just raise your hand and all right. So Sneha, is there anybody else?
Sir, may I?
No. Hello. Who is this?
Yes, please.
Sir, what psychological approach we can design or we can implement at ground level and integrate with the daily routine needs, especially at rural level? Are you getting my point, sir?
No, please explain.
Sir, what psychological approach we can make it, what we can implement at a ground level, especially at rural level, so that people participate with enthusiasm, with motivation. Because most of the time, what you are telling right now, that's what it. Anything with your experience, sir? Any idea?
Here what I would like to sort of highlight is that what we have done in the last, say, 200 years,
right, sir,
is that we have reduced people to the level of petitioners. For anything and everything, they need to write a petition and give it to the authority, whether it is the collector, whether it is the MLA, whether it is the minister. People have stopped to look upon themselves for that. For a lot of issues, the solution is with them, not with someone sitting far away or at a distance. So this mindset has to change. And if you look at it, say in Gram Panchayat Development Plan, there are a whole lot of things which can be done at no cost or low cost. And if you look at it, and there are examples where people have found solutions, especially to issues relating to education, health, hygiene, sanitation, without any monetary sort of support from outside. Once they began to believe that it was in their interest and that they alone, it was in their capacity to find those solutions. So the first and most important thing is that we have to inculcate in the people that once they begin to collectively think on how to solve problems themselves, rather than spending their time and energy in writing petitions and petitioning people right from President of India to the SDM and the Tehsildar. There are a variety of or a large number of issues for which they would be able to find solutions. There are scores of such success stories which are documented, which you can access. But the critical thing is that change in mindset. That has to change. And there our role becomes that how do we sort of act as the bridge where we help them to make this change in their minds.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay, Sneha and then Arul.
Hi, sir. It was great listening to you. I had two questions. The first one is you were telling there are some design flaws in the 73rd and 74th Amendment, and also you were telling about how Gram Sabhas and all are not very effective in the progressive state. So one thing I would like to ask is what do you think of the PRI-CBO convergence model, like the community-based organizations, SHGs, VO and CLF, the PRI-CBO convergence model? One is this. And the second question would be, for sarpanchas and all, as far as I know, they are paid an honorarium of like around 3,000 to 4,000 rupees. So this is comparatively a very less amount. So do you think this affects the quality of local governance, and what can be done to like incentivize them more?
Now here to answer your question first, role of CBOs, civil society organizations, that is extremely critical. And the problem, as I say it, is that we work in a project mode. A lot of these CSOs, they receive funding, and the donors, they have certain goals. They ask these CSOs, what will at the end of 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, what is it that you will show? And what has to be shown should be quantitative. So the focus of several CBOs, CSOs, NGOs begins or remains around this project implementation. They are monitoring, we have to show them these results. Therefore, we need to adopt this strategy. Whereas when you are working with PRIs, and more so if you are directly working with the people, we have to sort of put across issues, first make them understand in the language in which they can understand. Even the poorest, even the most illiterate, they should be able to understand the various dimensions of that issue. And here that role can be performed only by the CBOs and CSOs. So there your role becomes extremely critical. Now it requires patience, it requires time. Whether the donor will give you that time, they'll say, what is it that I want results? What has changed? Even if they were to say, they'll say, how many people participated in the meetings of Gram Sabha? What was it that was decided in that? Now here again, there is little that CBOs can do or you can do in the field unless and until the system is changed. And how can that be changed? Say, even if people were to raise issues in the Gram Sabha, how is the agenda set? Who sets the agenda? Will the issues raised by people will be allowed to be taken up in the Gram Sabha? More often than not, meetings of Gram Sabha, the way they are conducted, it degenerates into a Jhagda Sabha, where people are sort of speaking at cross purposes. And in several places, more often than not, the Gram Sabha meetings where people begin to speak vociferously, it ends in chaos and then it is adjourned. And then you have in the Act provision that if a meeting has been adjourned, then in the next meeting, even if the quorum is not sort of adhered to, still it would be a valid Gram Sabha meeting. So in that case, there is no onus on the Sarpanch or anyone else to make the meetings of Gram Sabha sort of function in a very sort of proper democratic manner. So these are issues which need to be addressed. So yes, CBOs have a very important role because you can act as that bridge. The bureaucrat will never, that Panchayat secretary will never, under no circumstances, he will go out of his way to ensure that each and every citizen or member of the Gram Sabha begins to question him. The day people begin to question, everyone will need to fall in line. But we have to see, is there any mechanism, anything similar to even question hour that you have in Parliament and State Legislative Assembly? Is there anything akin to that in the Gram Sabha? The answer would be no. There is no way in which how these Gram Sabha meetings have to be conducted, who will preside over it, how will issues be raised, will any time be set for these issues? There is no provision. It's all a totally gray area. So this, I think, is extremely important. And this, once people begin to discuss, deliberate, and demand that we want Gram Sabha to be very effective, we want to have our say in the Gram Sabha, and for that we need these changes. If people begin to collectively think and demand and put pressure on MLAs that you make these amendments in the State Panchayati Raj Act and rules, then it will happen. Otherwise, no matter how good a secretary is, there is no way in my view, in which he is going to make Gram Sabha very strong, something akin to legislature at the Panchayat level. Because the day it happens, it will change all rules of the game, the way Sarpanch functions, the way Panchayat secretary functions, the way different government department functionaries function. Now you raise the other issue of remuneration. Today, we must recognize that local governance is not a part-time job. Okay, it is a full-time job. And the success stories that we see, there the Sarpanches were working or did work 24/7, 24 hours a day. They had no free time. They could not say, now my office time is over, I'm at home and I'm not going to listen to you. He does not have that flexibility which government officials have. He has to be there 24/7. Now, if that be the case, how do you expect that his household can even run by paying him 3,000 rupees or 5,000 rupees? Even if you look at the minimum wages, it's less than that. And it is high time that we begin to recognize that there are certain costs in a democracy. And that costs need to be borne by government. There needs to be greater devolution. There needs to be greater powers to the local government to raise resources and then to use them on sort of programs and functions which they feel is important. And for that, it is important that these honorarium immediately of the elected representatives, that is the Sarpanch and the ward members, it should be raised several times over than what it is. Then only your Panchayat building or Panchayat office which in some states it's called Panchayat Gram Sachivalaya, that will begin to open at the scheduled time, and the requisite services which are supposed to be provided to citizens in the Gram Sachivalaya or in the Panchayat office will begin to be provided to those citizens. But that requires that there has to be proper supervision of the staff that is working with the panchayats. Panchayats should have greater flexibility to engage whether an individual, a consultant, or even a private company to provide or deliver services at the panchayats. It is not going to work in present times that you only have or provide services by directly employing people for each and every job that you do. That day is gone. But they can and they should have the flexibility to engage a professional, whether it is a consultant, whether it is a sort of a company, to provide specific services to them. They should be able to enter into contracts which are legally binding, wherein both the service provider and the agency which engages the company, both of them are legally bound to honor that contract. And for that, they will need to be sufficiently empowered and trained and so going ahead in future, I believe that this is how local governments will need to change their view towards providing these services to citizens also. It is a full-time activity. Their honorarium needs to be sort of enhanced several times over, and it should be at par with, based on certain objective criteria, not on freebies to be given before the elections. Whether we are seeing it in Haryana or Maharashtra or any other place. Before the elections, come elections, and then all chief ministers, they begin to promise, I'll raise your honorarium from 3,000 to 5,000, 5,000 to 8,000 or whatever. It has happened in Haryana, it is happening in Maharashtra. And tomorrow it will happen in any other state which will go to the polls. It needs to be properly thought through. And that leads to the other question, that are our local governments, as they are sort of designed today, in terms of their size, in terms of their population, are they viable units? Is there need to look at the way in which new panchayats are created, or panchayats are submerged or changed into a town area or a municipality, or not changed? You'll find the whole structure is very subjective. It depends on the whims and fancies of the state government. Whether a panchayat will be in vogue or it will get submerged or bifurcated into smaller units. It happened in Telangana. The number of panchayats more than doubled. And the next 20 years will be spent just providing a panchayat bhavan and a panchayat secretary to those panchayats. So in the present times where means of communication have developed so much, whether it is road connectivity, whether it is mobile connectivity, whether it is telecom, we need to take these things into account and then take a fresh look as to how our panchayats have been carved out, how our urban bodies have been carved out. And towards this end, even if at some point of time, if a demand is made that there should be a delimitation commission, which should be carving out the panchayats and the urban local bodies every 10 years based on certain objective criteria, which takes into account their ability to raise resources and to provide services at a proper level to all citizens in their area or constituency. All these things will need to be thought through. So it is a full-time activity. We can no longer approach it as a part-time activity. And for that, if honorarium needs to be raised, so be it. And it should be a cost which should be borne by government. And we must sort of look at it in a totally fresh light, because what is happening today is totally ad hoc. It is totally like buying something in the sabji market. You go to a vegetable shop and then you bargain. 1 रुपए में दोगे कि 50 पैसे में दोगे? चलो 50 नहीं 75 ले लो. It should not happen like that. It should be, governance is a serious issue. And once we realize that, then we'll find the resources for this too. It's not something that we cannot afford. We can definitely afford, but we just do not want to do it at this point of time.
Thank you, sir.
So just as one thing, so the meeting will end sharp at 6 because Zoom is operated like that, like there's a timer. So for the interest of time, I remember Arul and Ashtami had raised their hands. If we can just quickly take the questions first, and then you can go on to answer. Would that work, sir?
Yeah, it's fine with me.
So Arul, please go ahead with your question.
Hello, sir. I'm Arul Singh, so I'm based in Jashpur right now. So, I mean, you kind of answered the question. There were some, but I'm still a bit confused because there are certain forms of inequalities that are more visible as we go down this chain of a 3-tier government, and the intensity also increases as we go down. And since you mentioned COVID also, how these villages were very accommodating, but there were certain news, and this news were coming from many grams, many panchayats, many villages where Dalits and these people were not even allowed to enter the villages. And then it led to a research in 2023 in Tamil Nadu, where I think 114, if I'm not wrong, 114 Gram Panchayat presidents were questioned and they were surveyed, and they got to know that these people face 30 forms of discriminations. I think the group was done by Evidence, if I'm not wrong. So in one way, we are relying on these Gram Sabhas, these local governments, to voice their opinion. And so should we rely on them also to make these laws, so that, or should we rely on the top tier government? They will make the laws and then it will trickle down? Or should this come from these Gram Sabhas itself? And I mean, in Rajasthan, I think the Gram Panchayat, this institution was adopted first time in Rajasthan. And Rajasthan still faces those forms of inequalities. So
that is right.
So
any more question? I'll answer that. It's a very important question. I'll answer that.
Hello, sir. I'm Ostami. I am placed in Uttar Pradesh. My question to you, sir, you have referred the Gram Sabhas as, that evaporates into kind of Jhagra Sabhas. So I just wanted to understand, sir, like how do sometimes we see there is not such equal participation of all the line departments coming together in the Gram Sabhas and putting their points out at all, sir. So is there any clause in any kind of laws which mandates them to come and attend the meetings, sir? Is there any way in which they can be monitored, sir? That was my question.
Okay.
So just
now,
one.
Okay. One more.
Yeah, I had a question as well.
Yes.
So you mentioned that technology cannot fix structural issues, which is very rightly pointed out. But I also wanted to hear your take on sort of the way things have changed right now, as in a lot of things that Gram Sabha was entrusted with. For instance, looking at FRA claims and finding evidence and validating it, have now gone to, let's say, consultancy or technology-based firms like satellite imaging, and often the FRA claims are denied based on only sold satellite image. which is not how it's supposed to happen. So the with the rise of big consultancies and these firms, Gram Sabha has often lost that sense of power, at least in our current context. So where do you see this going with technology, with consultancy? What do you see happening in this issue? So that's
Right. Okay. Now, the first question was that how do you look at the power imbalance, which is more pronounced at the local level? And if you look at it, whether it is caste inequality, social inequality, those are very apparent in rural areas, very pronounced. Even on date, we come across instances in Tamil Nadu where a Dalit Sarpanch is not allowed to hoist the national flag. In Fatehpur in Uttar Pradesh, one Dalit Sarpanch was sitting outside his house on a chair, and that was objected to by those belonging to the upper caste. And more often than not, you find that pressure is exerted on these Dalit Sarpanches to act like rubber stamp of the powers that be who would like to pull the strings from behind. That is, they act like their puppets. It is something which is very rare. It cannot be wished away. And to just leave it that Gram Sabha or Gram Panchayat will function in the manner in which they have functioned all along, I think that will not really change the situation. What is required is that we begin to take a fresh look. If we go to the Ward Sabha, now in a panchayat, you will see that there are 5 or 6 villages, whether they are called tolas, mohallas, or whatever. And even otherwise, we know that in a panchayat, there would be at least 10 wards, 9 to 15 wards in general. Now, if we make the ward sabhas, and in the PESA areas or in the PESA Act, every village or every habitation is to have a Gram Sabha. So one thought is that in a panchayat, there could be several Gram Sabhas as per the PESA Act, because each village has its own Gram Sabha. And even in the letter which Babu Gowda Patil had written to the states in 1999, he had mentioned that each village should have its own Gram Sabha. Even if we don't go into that, and we just stick to the Ward Sabha, which finds a place in several state Panchayati Raj Acts, we'll find that some solution to this problem will get found. Because these Ward Sabhas will be held or organized in those tolas or those villages where scheduled caste and other people would be in a majority. Right now, they find it difficult to attend a meeting of the Gram Sabha if it is organized in the village where the upper castes have a greater sort of hold or say. They would just not go and attend those meetings. So one way out could be organizing or strengthening the Ward Sabhas. The other way out could be that we organize sort of just like we have these Mahila Sabhas, where all the women can get together. The SHG members, if they collectively come together and begin to discuss on these governance issues, raise issues which are important to them, and that begins to get articulated in the Gram Sabha. Or say if the discussions or the demands which are voiced in these Mahila Sabhas or Bal Sabhas, which have been or which find a place in some state Panchayati Raj Acts and which are also being advocated by Government of India, then we find that to a certain extent, we would be successful in sort of resolving these issues or conflicts and make the functioning of Gram Sabha more democratic. But the truth is that if we accept that, yes, this is a problem, then we would be able to find answers even in the meetings of Gram Sabha. Let me illustrate this. First, all voters are supposed to, or theoretically, they are members of the Gram Sabha. Now, if there are 1,000 voters and all were to attend, there is absolutely no place, no way in which an organized meeting can take place. Even in assemblies, even in parliament, where you have less than 400, 500 people, members, look at the vast paraphernalia and the system which is in place to ensure that organized discussion and debate takes place. Are those facilities available at the Gram Sabha? Unfortunately, no. So the one solution could be is that make ward sabhas more effective, let more people attend meetings of ward sabha. Then one suggestion could be that every ward can nominate 10 people to represent them in the meetings of Gram Sabha and air their views, and their views are also recorded, their discussions are recorded, and that gets transmitted to the Gram Sabha. Then you will find that in the meeting of Gram Sabha, those 10 people, and it should include people from all sections, both men as well as women. Then you will find that, say, if there are 10 wards, so 100 people are expected to attend the meeting of the Gram Sabha. And if out of 100, even 80 are attending, make it 80 or 90% mandatory, then they are representing the views and a large cross-section of the people. So these solutions can be found to these issues. The second issue is, should lawmaking powers be given to the Gram Sabha? Gram Sabha does not have lawmaking power. Legislation remains with the state assembly and parliament. It's not to be sort of delegated to the Gram Sabhas. At best, Gram Sabhas can make some rules regarding certain issues and enforce it within the boundary of their panchayat. But that also, and it should not be in conflict with any state law or central law. Then only those rules can be enforced. Because recently, say in Maharashtra, one Gram Panchayat decided to ban the use of mobiles for a certain period and for certain age groups, because they felt that people were getting sort of hooked onto these mobiles and they were neglecting their studies. So it is a rule-making power. But these things need to be codified. We need to codify the rules and procedures by which the meetings of Gram Sabha are to be held. We need to find out as to who will preside over the meetings of Gram Sabha. It should be someone different from the Sarpanch, because you cannot have the head of the executive also determining how the legislature, I am just using that word for Gram Sabha, to which the executive is accountable, how it will run. So these are some of the issues that we'll need to examine and need to put in place to ensure that these local problems get sorted out. But yes, we can find these solutions at the local level. The second point which was made was regarding these technology. How use of technology is further sort of weakening the Gram Sabha. This, I believe, is a very sort of unfortunate trend. The trend in the last 10, 15 years is towards centralization of power. And this centralization of power, wherein people feel, and there are certain consultants, certain companies which come to different ministries, make presentations before ministers and secretaries. Look, this is how you can bypass the state government. This is how you can bypass the local bureaucracy. Sitting here on your dashboard, you can see what is happening, who is receiving how many kgs of ration, who is receiving the sort of Kisan Samman Nidhi funds or not. Everything you can monitor from here. Now, there are serious drawbacks. First, in Government of India or at the central level or even at the state level, forget the state, even at the district level, no one has the time or place or inclination to sift through this vast data which is getting generated. Someone has to analyze that data. More often than not, we are collecting data and not analyzing them, not using them. We use not even 1% of the data which we are collecting from the field. And then we are absolutely reluctant to share it even with the state government, forget the local government. So the way in which this technology can be of use is not by centralizing it, but by making it available to the local government so that they can take better informed decisions. This is how this whole data structure needs to be redesigned. The findings need to be shared by the concerned with the concerned local government, whether urban or rural. And today, if technology has provided us the means by which we can come up with micro sort of reports at the ward level, even down to the ward level, it is possible. Because all wards now have LGD codes. And if those are used in the data set, in the master data, we can generate such reports. So the challenge today is that how do we make this data useful for local government at the local level so that they can take better informed decisions. By putting it up on a dashboard, it is good to look at, but no one would be able to analyze it. And for industrialists, for industry, for consultants, for big firms, it is more fashionable to say, look, based on this, we can come up with this presentation, we can make this film, we can make that film. But when it comes to actually using that, they find that there's nothing which they can do. Because then what will Government of India do? It will say that I will write to the state government. And then from the state government, it will go to the district collector, and then from the collector to the subdivisional magistrate, and then downwards. So this is no way of looking at it. There is no way, if we are foolish enough to sort of pin all our hopes only on technology, so then I'm sure that we are wasting our time. It's not going to succeed. It may make good business for some firms, but otherwise, as far as citizens are concerned, there's nothing that is going to happen. And to give an example, say with all this digitization, if something goes wrong, if you go to a bank and say, look, I have not received this fund, they'll say, there's nothing that we can do. It is all computer driven. We cannot intervene. We don't know who is responsible. And people now find there is no place and face where they can go and appeal. So what this technology or digital technology has done, it has made the whole system faceless. There is no way in which any accountability can be fixed on anyone. And the citizen does not know as to when and where and by whom his grievance will get redressed, if at all. So this, I think, is more retrograde when you look at it from the point of citizen. Unfortunately, we design systems and laws keeping the administrators' sort of convenience in mind. We do not design it from the citizen's point of view. And what we need to sort of focus on is to how do we use technology to empower the citizens and put in place systems and mechanisms which makes the whole system accountable to the people, that is, the citizens. If we do that, yes, this same technology can facilitate that. But if we want to centralize powers, then everything will get centralized. So we have to use technology very sort of effectively. And for that, it is important that people should begin to demand that we require this. And in a democracy, those who are in government, they do heed to demands made by the public. They cannot sort of overlook it for a long time. If 50 people collect together and jointly begin to voice their demand, then the official has to come out and listen to them and find solutions. So that is the sort of good thing about democracy. But then it is more often than not, we are sort of caught in that mindset where we feel that as if we are weak, we have no powers, we have no say, and it's only on the day of elections that we can exercise some power. That is not how democracy is to work. And therefore, in my view, by strengthening local government, by sort of making data, making technology, and sort of utilizing it in such a manner that it empowers the local governments rather than weaken it, then I think we would be on the right track. And there was one more question, second question, which I think I had missed out. What was that?
The question was about how do you monitor Gram Sabha meetings and
Gram Sabha meetings, yeah, it is possible to monitor. In fact, now you have dashboards in Ministry of Panchayati Raj, which says if you are scheduling a Gram Sabha, it should be entered there. Then the meeting held, it should be entered there. Then even decisions of you on a sort of app called Gram Nirnay, it should be uploaded. The point is that if you have 2.5 lakh Gram Panchayats and Gram Sabhas in the country, who in Ministry of Panchayati Raj has the time to even see those videos which are getting uploaded even for 2 minutes, forget 15-minute videos, but we are uploading it. The solution is that make it accessible to people at the local level themselves, to researchers, to CBOs. You should be able to see that and then begin to ask questions. Certain things like, say, in Meri Panchayat app, all the expenditure details of any panchayat is available in that app. Someone has to analyze that and begin to ask questions. And once they begin to ask questions, then the pressure will begin to be exerted. If it is not going to be exerted, then it is difficult to sort of see as to which agency or which institution is functioning properly or not. Because ultimately, people should be able to see. But there are ways and means in which we can work this out so that we can, that's a matter of a separate year on Gram Sabha itself. We can have another talk at some later stage. Thank you.
I think Ashtami has written.
Okay, how do we ensure participation of the line departments? Now, to this, there is two ways. One way is, in my view, that right now, the standing committees of the panchayat, here what is, for almost every standing committee, it is the panchayat secretary who is responsible. And we all know that panchayat secretary is not there for every gram panchayat. In several states, you have one panchayat secretary who is handling 5 or 6 or more gram panchayats. So he never has the time for all that. One way could be that make some departmental, say if it is education standing committee dealing with education, then make the education department official the member secretary of that standing committee. Then if any question is to be asked in the Gram Sabha, it should, and if it is asked 7 days in advance, then it becomes the duty of that member secretary of that department to prepare the answer and provide it to the Gram Sabha through the chairman of the standing committee. So then what we are ensuring is that these members of standing committee who are officials of line departments, they become answerable to the Gram Sabha through the chairman of these standing committees. So in that way, their accountability to Gram Sabha will be much more. Right now, we are just looking at figures. See how many people attended the meeting of Gram Sabha or not. And we find that in different meetings of the Gram Sabha, you'll have different officials of those line departments who are attending. And if any question has been asked in the previous Gram Sabha, he will plead that it was asked to someone else. I'm not aware of it. I'm physically present. You mark my presence, but I have nothing to say on any issue relating to the subject or the matter which has been raised. So this is no way of ensuring presence of line department. It is an administrative issue. We can find solutions, and for that we'll need to make suitable amendments in the Act as well as the state Panchayati Raj rules. Then some of these parastatals or say conflicting bodies which have been set up under the guidelines of different schemes of Government of India or the state government, which act in parallel to the standing committees, they need to be disbanded forthwith if these standing committees are to be really made powerful. You cannot have a separate committee created for Jal Jeevan Mission, separate for Swachhta Mission under their guidelines, under their project guidelines, which are contrary to what is legally sanctioned under the Panchayati Raj Act. So once we begin to understand this, then we can find ways and means to ensure presence of these officials. And the day Gram Sabha gets the power to pass the budget of the Gram Panchayat, that would be the day when all these things will get sorted out.
Okay. If we don't have any more questions, I think we can conclude the session. Thank you so much, sir, for addressing us. It was a really insightful session. We learned a lot of things. And yeah.
Thank you.
But we will also be circulating a reflection form, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, thank you,
Okay.
everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.